The loner rancher waited for his mail-order bride, and a woman twice his size stepped off the wagon. Eli Thompson lived at the edge of the town of Red Rock, a small western settlement surrounded by rolling hills, dusty plains, and endless blue skies. His ranch was modest but well kept, with a wooden fence that creaked when the wind blew, and a barn that smelled faintly of hay and horses. Life on the ranch was not easy, but Eli knew no other way. From the moment he could remember, he had worked with his hands, rising before the sun to tend the cattle, mend fences, and feed the horses. Most days, the only sound besides the wind and the animals was the occasional clatter of boots on the wooden porch. Eli liked it that way. He liked the quiet, the solitude, and the rhythm of ranch life. But as much as he loved his land, he could not deny the hollow feeling that sometimes crept into his chest in the evenings, when the sun dipped below the hills, leaving shadows that stretched like long fingers across the dusty ground.
Eli was a man of routine.
Each morning he would wake to the crow of a rooster, wash his face in the cold water of a tin basin, and step outside to feel the crisp air on his skin. The smell of hay, leather, and earth filled his senses, and he would whistle softly as he checked the fences and counted the cattle. Breakfast was simple, often just bread, cheese, and coffee made over a small stove, but he ate with gratitude. His life was not extravagant, but it was honest and steady. He had never married, never had a woman by his side, and in truth, he had begun to think that he never would. He had resigned himself to a life of quiet, solitary labor, believing that perhaps this was his lot in life. And yet, Eli had hope. Hope that came in the form of letters. For months now, he had exchanged letters with a woman named Clara through a mail-order system. She had lived far to the east, in a town he had never seen. But her letters were warm, full of laughter, and carefully written. In her writing, she described simple pleasures: baking bread, tending a small garden, reading by the fire, and Eli found himself smiling as he read each word. In return, he wrote honestly about his life, about the ranch, the cattle, the work that never ended, and the quiet loneliness that sometimes pressed upon him at night. Their letters had become his lifeline, a way to imagine a life that might one day be shared. Eli had pictured Clara many times. In his mind, she was gentle, soft-spoken, with a small frame and delicate hands that could rest lightly on his arm. He imagined her in a simple dress, tending a garden, perhaps with a smile that could light up the long, lonely evenings. He had prepared his home for her arrival, cleaning the rooms, polishing the wooden floorboards until they shone, and setting the table with care. He even painted the front porch a brighter shade, thinking that she would like to sit there in the evening, sipping tea as they watched the sun set over the hills. Every detail mattered. Eli wanted everything to be perfect for her first day at the ranch. The week before her arrival, Eli found himself restless. He walked through the fields more slowly, examining each fence post, each row of crops, and the small garden he had planted in hopes of impressing her. He practiced conversations in his head, wondering if she would like the bread he baked or the stew he often cooked over the fire. The townspeople noticed him walking about more often, hat in hand, a faint smile on his face that they had not seen before. Old Man Harris, who lived nearby, shook his head and chuckled, muttering, "Eli Thompson, you're like a young colt again." Eli only smiled, saying nothing, though inside he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness that he had not felt in years. On the morning Clara was expected, Eli woke earlier than usual. The sun had barely kissed the horizon, and a thin layer of frost covered the ground. He packed a small bag with essentials: a spare coat, some fresh bread, and a jar of sweet butter, thinking she might be hungry after the long journey. He made sure the horse was ready, the wagon clean, and the stable doors open. Every detail mattered. He could hardly contain his anticipation, pacing back and forth, glancing down the dusty road every few minutes. His heart beat faster with each passing hour, a mixture of hope and anxiety. Finally, in the distance, he saw a wagon approaching, its wheels kicking up dust that hung in the morning air like a golden mist. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He straightened his hat, adjusted his coat, and tried to calm the nervous flutter in his chest. The wagon grew closer, the driver urging the horses forward, and Eli's mind raced. This was it. The moment he had waited for, imagined, and prepared for. He thought of Clara's letters, her delicate handwriting, the way she had described herself as small and timid, and he felt a warmth in his chest. He was ready to meet her, to welcome her to the ranch that had been his only home for so long. As the wagon pulled up to a stop, Eli's eyes widened. A figure stepped down, but it was not the small, delicate woman he had pictured. Instead, a tall, broad-shouldered woman emerged, her presence commanding even in the dusty morning light. She carried herself with confidence, and when she smiled it was warm and genuine, but it was not at all what Eli had imagined. His mind struggled to reconcile the image in his head with the woman before him. She was strong, larger than life, and entirely unexpected. For a moment, Eli said nothing. He tipped his hat politely, unsure of what to say. The woman laughed softly, a rich sound that seemed to carry across the fields. "You must be Eli," she said. Her voice was kind, steady, and filled with a confidence that made him feel both nervous and strangely at ease. "I'm Martha. I've come a long way." Eli's surprise lingered, but he forced a smile. "Welcome to Red Rock," he said, offering his hand. She shook it firmly, and the warmth of her grip surprised him. She was not what he had expected, not at all, but there was a strength in her presence that made him realize that perhaps the image he had built in his mind was just that, an image, not the reality of life. As they walked toward the ranch, the horses snorted and shuffled, dust rising in small clouds around their feet. Martha spoke easily about her journey, about the long hours on the wagon, the towns she had passed, and the people she had met. Eli listened, realizing that he had spent so long imagining a perfect companion that he had forgotten to consider the real person who would arrive. She was not delicate or timid. She was strong, capable, and resilient. And yet there was a kindness in her eyes, a humor in her smile, and a lightness in her laughter that made the long journey seem worthwhile. When they reached the ranch, Eli showed her the house, the barn, and the land he had tended for years. He explained his routines, the care of the animals, and the work that awaited her if she chose to help. Martha listened, asking questions, making observations, and even offering suggestions that Eli had never considered. Slowly, his nervousness began to fade. There was a practicality about her, a sense of readiness for life on the ranch, that impressed him more than he could have imagined. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills, Eli realized that the loneliness he had carried for so long had begun to lift. Martha was not the woman he had imagined, but in some ways, she was even better. She was real, solid, and present, not a delicate dream built from letters and hopes. And as the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Eli felt a spark of hope that perhaps this unexpected woman could become a companion, a partner, and a friend in the life he had so long lived alone. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to imagine the future, not a future built from letters and expectations, but one built from reality, laughter, and the quiet strength of a woman who had come all this way to meet him. And though he could not yet see where the path would lead, he knew one thing for certain: life on the ranch would never be the same again. And for the first time, that thought brought him a deep, steady joy he had never known. The day began with the same golden light spilling across the hills, but Eli's mind was far from his usual work. His thoughts kept returning to the figure he had seen stepping off the wagon the day before, Martha. She was nothing like he had imagined, tall, strong, broad-shouldered, but there was something about the way she carried herself, confident and steady, that lingered in his mind. He could not deny that he was intrigued, though he also felt a flicker of doubt. Could this woman really fit into the quiet life of a rancher, a life built on routine, solitude, and hard work? By morning, Martha had settled in enough to move around the house and the yard. She had unpacked a few bags, neatly placing her belongings in the small dresser Eli had polished before her arrival. Her presence filled the rooms in a way he had never expected. She laughed easily as she explored, commenting on the sturdiness of the furniture, the smell of the wooden floors, and even the state of the fireplace, which she insisted could use a little more cleaning. Eli watched her from the porch, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness stirring in his chest. He had prepared so carefully for a delicate, quiet woman. Instead, he had received someone full of energy, confidence, and presence. "Morning, Eli," she called, stepping onto the porch with a smile that seemed to brighten the whole yard. "The coffee smells wonderful. Mind if I join you?" Eli nodded, fumbling slightly as he offered her a chair. "Of course," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. He poured coffee into 2 mugs, the steam rising in gentle curls between them. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Martha said, taking a sip. "Better than I expected after the long ride. Your house is cozy." "I like it." Her tone was warm, genuine, and Eli felt a small sense of relief. Perhaps she would find life here more comfortable than he feared. Breakfast was simple: bread, cheese, and coffee. But the conversation that followed was lively. Martha asked questions about the ranch, about the animals, and about the daily work Eli performed alone. He answered honestly, explaining the routines, the chores, and the challenges of tending to the land year-round. She listened attentively, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering her own ideas. It was clear that she was not intimidated by the work, nor by the solitary life that Eli led. After breakfast, Eli decided to show her the ranch. They walked side by side through the fields, past the cattle grazing lazily in the morning sun. Martha pointed out a few spots where the fence posts looked weathered and suggested reinforcing them. She moved with ease over the uneven ground, lifting gates, checking the animals, and asking questions that showed not only curiosity, but a practical mind. Eli could not help but notice the strength in her arms, the steady confidence in her hands, and the way she seemed perfectly at home with the physical work that defined his life. Despite his growing admiration, Eli struggled to reconcile this woman with the image he had built in his mind. Clara, the delicate, petite companion he had imagined, was nowhere to be found. Instead, he had Martha, who was bold, strong, and larger than life. A part of him felt awkward, even embarrassed, thinking of what the townspeople might say when they saw them together. Would they whisper about the mistake he had made? Would they question his judgment? Martha, however, seemed oblivious to any such concerns. She laughed at his hesitations, teased gently when he stumbled over his words, and carried herself with a self-assuredness that made him both nervous and impressed. She did not fit the mold he had imagined, but she had something else, a practicality and strength that Eli could not ignore. The first task of the day was the barn. Eli showed her the stalls, explaining which horses were calm and which required careful handling. Martha listened and watched carefully, then moved to help, lifting hay bales with ease and cleaning the stalls with a skill that impressed him. He had never seen anyone adapt so quickly to the demands of ranch life. "You've done this before?" he asked, genuinely curious. "A little," she admitted, wiping sweat from her brow. "Not as big a ranch as this, but I've worked with animals before. I like it." She smiled, and for the first time, Eli felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. By midday, they were in the fields, checking fences and repairing a section that had been damaged in a recent storm. Eli handed Martha a hammer and nails, and she worked with confidence, measuring, aligning, and driving the nails with precision. He tried to hide his amazement, but it was impossible. She was strong, capable, and practical in ways he had never anticipated. Even so, there were moments of tension. Martha's energy and boldness sometimes clashed with Eli's quiet, methodical approach. She moved quickly, often finishing tasks before he expected, while he took time to ensure every detail was perfect. He occasionally tried to slow her down, worried she might rush or miss something, and she would smile and tease him gently. "Eli, it's fine. I've got this," she would say, and he would reluctantly let her continue, realizing that her way, though different, worked just as well. The townspeople noticed the new arrival almost immediately. Word spread quickly about Eli's mail-order bride, and whispers followed him wherever he went. Some of the neighbors chuckled, others were curious, and a few raised eyebrows at the sight of the tall, strong woman walking beside the quiet rancher. Eli felt a flush of embarrassment at first, wishing he could retreat into the privacy of his land. Martha, however, seemed unaffected. She greeted the townspeople with warmth and confidence, laughed easily at their jokes, and quickly made a good impression on many of them. By evening, they returned to the house, tired but satisfied with the day's work. Martha had moved naturally into the routines of the ranch, feeding the animals, carrying water, and even helping Eli prepare a simple stew for dinner. They ate together in comfortable silence at first, then gradually began to talk more freely. Martha shared stories from her past, the town she had lived in, and the challenges she had faced. Eli listened, fascinated by her experiences and struck by how much courage and resilience she possessed. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with the quiet sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the rustle of the wind through the grass, and the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. Eli felt a sense of relief wash over him. Despite the unexpected beginning, he was beginning to see the value in Martha's presence. She was not what he had imagined, but perhaps she was even better. Martha broke the silence with a soft laugh. "You seem tense, Eli. Are you sure you're not imagining me as some delicate flower that will tip over if you look at me wrong?" Eli chuckled, feeling a warmth spread across his face. Maybe I had a different picture in my mind," he admitted, "but I see now you're different. Strong, capable. Not what I expected, but—" He paused, searching for words. "Not bad at all." Martha reached over, placing a hand on his arm, her smile steady and reassuring. "I think different can be good," she said simply. "You might be surprised what we can accomplish together." For the first time, Eli allowed himself to imagine that she might stay, not just for a day, not just as a visitor, but as someone who could truly be a part of his life. The thought was both thrilling and frightening, but mostly thrilling. He realized that the image he had built from letters and imagination had been only that, an image. Martha was real, and in her strength, humor, and warmth, she offered something more valuable than perfection: companionship, partnership, and a chance at happiness he had never thought possible. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Eli and Martha lingered on the porch. They spoke of simple things, plans for the next day, the work that awaited them, and the stories they had shared. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and a sense of understanding that had begun to grow between them. Eli realized that perhaps life on the ranch would never be the same again, and that was not a bad thing. In fact, it might be the best thing that had ever happened to him. When they finally went inside, Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had been long, the work hard, but he had seen the beginnings of something extraordinary. Martha was unexpected, different from the woman he had imagined in his letters. But she was also strong, brave, and full of life. And as he lay down that night, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, he allowed himself to feel a hope he had not felt in years, that maybe, just maybe, this unusual, larger-than-life woman could become the companion he had been waiting for all along. The days that followed Martha's arrival were filled with both work and quiet discovery. Eli had hoped that the first day's awkwardness would fade easily, but he quickly realized that living and working with another person, especially someone so different from himself, brought its own challenges. Martha was strong, capable, and independent, but she also had her own ideas about how things should be done. Eli, used to working alone and doing things in his careful, methodical way, found himself both impressed and frustrated by her energy. Their mornings began early, as usual. The sun was barely a golden line on the horizon when Eli would step out to check the fences or tend to the cattle. Martha, energetic and alert, was always beside him, moving quickly from task to task. She would lift hay bales, feed the animals, and even suggest better ways to organize the barn. Eli admired her skills, but sometimes he could not help but mutter under his breath about the things she changed without asking. "Careful," he said one morning as she moved a stack of feed sacks to a new spot. "I like things arranged a certain way." Martha only laughed, a light, musical sound that seemed to echo across the fields. "Eli, sometimes you need to let go of perfection," she said, setting the last sack down with a firm thud. "The animals don't care which way the sacks are stacked. We'll get more done this way." Eli hesitated, his pride pricked, but he nodded slowly. Perhaps she was right. He had spent so many years doing everything himself, believing that only he could do it properly. Watching Martha work reminded him that strength and efficiency came in many forms. Despite these small clashes, there were moments of connection. During the long hours in the fields, Eli began to notice the small things about Martha. The way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the way she spoke to the animals as if they understood her words, the careful attention she paid to even the smallest details. Her presence, once surprising and unexpected, began to feel natural. He found himself smiling more, speaking more freely, and even looking forward to her suggestions. One afternoon, as they repaired a broken fence along the edge of the property, a disagreement arose. Eli wanted to reinforce the posts using traditional methods he had learned from his father, while Martha suggested a faster approach that would save time and effort. They argued gently but firmly, each trying to convince the other. "I've always done it this way," Eli said, tapping a post with his hammer. "It's stronger, more reliable." "I understand that," Martha replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "But we're working against the sun. If we do it my way, we'll finish faster and still be safe. Sometimes efficiency matters too." For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension heavy in the hot afternoon air. Then Eli sighed, realizing that her method worked just as well. "All right," he said, a small smile forming on his lips. "We'll try your way." Martha grinned, and together they worked, side by side, finishing the fence more quickly than either had expected. The shared success brought a sense of camaraderie, a realization that working together could be more rewarding than working alone. Eli felt a flicker of pride, not just in the work completed, but in the growing trust between them. Life on the ranch, however, was not all work. Martha brought a new energy into the home, one that Eli had never experienced. She cooked with a skill and creativity that surprised him, making simple ingredients taste better than he had ever imagined. She laughed easily at his attempts to help, teasing him gently when he spilled flour or burned bread. Slowly, the quiet house began to feel warmer, filled with life and light. Still, there were challenges. Martha's larger frame sometimes made the small house feel crowded, and her energetic approach to daily chores occasionally clashed with Eli's careful, measured pace. One evening, while preparing dinner, Eli accidentally dropped a pot, and the crash echoed through the kitchen. Martha laughed, her laughter ringing clear and unbothered, while Eli's face flushed with embarrassment. "You're too hard on yourself," she said, placing a hand on his arm. "It's just a pot. We can wash it and move on." He nodded, smiling despite himself. "I suppose I've spent too many years alone. I forget that accidents happen." Their conversations began to shift from practical matters to personal stories. Martha spoke of her childhood, the small towns she had lived in, and the challenges she had faced as a young woman learning to be self-reliant. Eli listened, fascinated by her experiences, and found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. The long days working alone, the quiet moments of loneliness, and even his hopes for the future. For the first time, he felt that he could trust someone with his thoughts and feelings, that he could speak openly without fear of judgment. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of a large oak tree, Eli realized that he was beginning to see Martha in a new light. She was not just a companion or a helper. She was a partner, someone who could share in both the work and the quiet moments of life. He admired her strength, her courage, and her willingness to step into a world that was foreign to her and make it her own. Yet despite the growing bond, Eli could not completely dismiss his doubts. Would the townspeople ever accept her? Would she be happy in a place so remote with so few people and so much hard work? He watched her carefully, noting her laughter, her confidence, and the way she moved through the land as if she belonged. Slowly, he began to understand that happiness was not about fitting a particular image, but about finding someone who complemented him, who shared his values, and who could face life's challenges alongside him. One evening, a minor crisis tested their new partnership. A small herd of cattle had wandered through a broken section of fence, and Eli and Martha had to work quickly to round them up before they wandered too far. The task required coordination, patience, and endurance. Martha's strength and decisiveness were invaluable, and Eli realized that she was not just physically capable but also remarkably resourceful. Together they managed to bring the cattle back safely, their laughter echoing across the fields as they finally secured the last post. "That was intense," Eli said, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at Martha and felt a new sense of admiration. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Martha smiled, a little flush on her cheeks from the exertion. "We make a good team," she said. "I think we'll manage just fine." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Eli felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had brought challenges, small conflicts, and moments of tension, but it had also brought laughter, connection, and a growing sense of partnership. He began to understand that the life he had imagined, quiet, solitary, predictable, was not the only path to happiness. Sometimes, unexpected changes could bring something even better. By the end of the week, Eli and Martha had settled into a rhythm. They worked side by side in the fields, repaired fences together, and shared meals that Martha prepared with care. Their conversations flowed more easily, and small moments of humor and teasing became a regular part of their days. The house, once quiet and empty, now felt warm and alive, filled with the sound of laughter, footsteps, and shared work. Eli began to see the value in Martha's presence, not just as a helper, but as someone who could share in the joys and burdens of ranch life. He realized that the image he had built from letters and imagination had been only a shadow of reality. Martha was real, strong, capable, and kind. She was not what he had expected, but she was exactly what he needed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, Eli felt a sense of peace he had never known. He no longer worried about appearances, gossip, or whether he had made the right choice. He understood that life was unpredictable, and that happiness often came from accepting the unexpected. Martha's laughter, her confidence, and her warmth had begun to fill a space in his heart that he had long thought empty. "You've changed the house already," Eli said quietly, smiling at her. "It feels different, in a good way." "I hope so," Martha replied, looking out over the fields. "I didn't come here to change your life completely, but I thought we could make it better, together." Eli nodded, feeling a quiet joy. He understood now that it was not about finding a perfect companion who fit an imagined image, but about finding someone who could stand beside him, share in the work, and bring laughter, courage, and warmth to his life. Martha was that person, and slowly he allowed himself to imagine a future where she remained by his side, through hard work, quiet evenings, and every challenge that life on the ranch might bring. For the first time, Eli felt that his life, once solitary and predictable, could be shared in a way that was both real and deeply fulfilling. Martha's presence had brought challenges, laughter, and unexpected joy, and he realized that he would never again view life in the same quiet, solitary way. Together they could face anything, and Eli found himself looking forward to the days ahead, ready for whatever surprises life might bring. The next few weeks passed quickly on the ranch. Eli and Martha had found a rhythm together, balancing work, chores, and meals, with laughter and gentle teasing becoming a daily part of life. But despite the growing ease between them, both knew that ranch life was never simple. The land could be harsh, the weather unpredictable, and the animals unpredictable. Nothing could fully prepare them for the test that came one late spring afternoon. It began with a storm. The sky, which had been a bright, clear blue in the morning, turned gray and heavy by mid-afternoon. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, and the wind began to whip through the trees and grass. Eli looked up at the sky with concern. He had seen storms before, but this one had a weight and urgency to it. He called out to Martha as she worked in the barn, stacking hay. "Martha, the sky's changing fast. We need to secure everything, fences, animals, and the barn." She nodded immediately, her face set with determination. "Let's do it. We don't have time to waste." Together they sprang into action. Eli gathered ropes and stakes, while Martha rounded up the animals, moving the more frightened ones into secure pens. The wind grew stronger, bending the young trees and sending dust swirling across the fields. The rain arrived in heavy sheets, soaking them to the bone as they worked. Despite the harshness of the storm, neither spoke of giving up. They moved as a team, communicating with short, clear instructions and encouraging words. The first challenge came when a section of the fence, weakened by previous storms, collapsed under the pressure of the wind. A small group of cattle had wandered into the field near the creek, where the water had started to rise dangerously. Eli's heart leapt into his throat. If the cattle went too far, they could be lost, or worse, injured. "Martha, we need to get them back." "The water's rising," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "I see them," she replied, her voice strong and calm. Without hesitation, She waded into the mud and water, her broad shoulders steady against the wind. Eli followed, trying to keep pace. The animals were scared, moving unpredictably, and Eli felt a surge of panic. But Martha's presence was grounding. She directed the cattle with confidence, her voice carrying over the storm, while Eli worked to block escape routes and guide them back toward safety. For an hour they struggled against the storm, mud caking their boots, rain plastering their hair and clothes. At one point, Eli slipped on the muddy bank, and Martha reached out immediately, pulling him back to solid ground. "Careful!" she shouted, her eyes filled with concern. Eli nodded, grateful for her quick reflexes. He realized in that moment that her size and strength were not something to fear or worry about. They were assets. She could handle the unexpected, and her courage bolstered him when he might have faltered. Finally, after long, exhausting minutes, they managed to get all the cattle back into a safe pen. Eli leaned against the fence, gasping for breath, while Martha shook the water from her coat and smiled at him. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" she said, laughter in her voice despite the storm still raging around them. Eli smiled, feeling a rush of relief and admiration. Yes, we do," he said. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to rely on another person completely, and to trust them with not only work but safety, life, and well-being. The storm did not end quickly. They spent the rest of the afternoon reinforcing fences, checking the barn for leaks, and securing tools and supplies. The wind howled, rain poured, and the ground was slippery and treacherous, but they moved together seamlessly, each anticipating the other's needs, offering help, and encouraging the other when exhaustion threatened. It was exhausting work, yet something about it felt alive, exciting, and profoundly bonding. That night, after the storm had passed, the ranch looked battered but intact. Eli and Martha stood on the porch, drying off as best they could, watching the moon reflect off puddles and mud across the fields. Their clothes were torn and stained, their hair damp and wild, but neither seemed to mind. The crisis had been terrifying, but it had also revealed something deeper between them. "You handled that storm better than I ever could have imagined," Eli said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. I
don't think I would have managed without you."
Martha smiled, brushing mud from her coat.
"We did it together."
I knew you could handle your part, Eli. That's what makes it work. For the first time, Eli felt a shift within himself. He had imagined companionship in a gentle, quiet way, but Martha had shown him something entirely different: strength, courage, humor, and the ability to face life's storms, both literal and figurative, were just as important as gentleness or delicacy. And he realized that he was falling in love with her, not because she fit a picture he had created, but because she was exactly who she was. The following days were calmer, but the storm left its mark. Some fences needed full replacement. A few crops were damaged, and the barn roof had minor leaks. Yet, Eli and Martha approached the work not as chores, but as a continuation of the teamwork that the storm had forced upon them. Each task they completed together brought more laughter, conversation, and understanding. One afternoon, while mending a particularly stubborn fence post, Eli paused and watched Martha. She worked quickly and skillfully, moving with strength and purpose. He noticed the way she smiled even when frustrated, how she encouraged the animals with gentle words, and how she never gave up, no matter how difficult the task. He felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride in having her by his side. "Martha," he said softly, setting down his hammer, "I need to tell you something." She looked up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "What is it?" I wasn't sure at first," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. You're not what I expected when I imagined Clara." But now, I don't care about that.
I see you for who you are, and I like you.
A lot, more than I thought I could. Martha's eyes softened, and she stepped closer. Eli, she said gently, I like you too. I wasn't sure how this would go, coming here working with someone I didn't know, but you've been honest, patient, and kind. I'm glad I came. They stood together in the fading sunlight, the quiet hum of the ranch around them, feeling a sense of connection that had been forged in sweat, mud, and shared effort. The storm had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and in doing so, revealed the strength of their growing bond. Over the next few weeks, Eli and Martha continued to work on the ranch, their partnership growing stronger each day. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet evenings on the porch, talking about dreams, past experiences, and hopes for the future. Each small task, each shared challenge, strengthened their trust and understanding. Eli no longer worried about appearances or expectations. He had found someone whose presence filled the spaces he had long thought empty. Martha's influence on the ranch extended beyond labor. She organized the small garden with care, improving the yield and making it more manageable. She repaired tools with skill, keeping the barn and equipment in top shape. And she brought warmth and humor into the house, softening the solitude that had once defined Eli's life. He began to see that happiness was not about finding someone who matched an imagined ideal, but about finding someone whose presence complemented, challenged, and strengthened him. One evening, after a long day of work in preparation for the coming week, they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The air was cool, the scent of earth and grass rising around them. Eli felt a sense of calm and contentment that he had never experienced before. Martha rested her head lightly on his shoulder, and for the first time he allowed himself to imagine a future with her, a life filled with challenges, laughter, and partnership, where they would face everything together. He realized that the storm had done more than test their strength. It had revealed the kind of love that grows not from imagination or expectation, but from shared experience, trust, and the courage to face life's difficulties together. And Eli knew that no matter what the future held, he and Martha were ready to face it, side by side, as partners in every sense of the word. The weeks following the storm brought a sense of calm and accomplishment to Eli's ranch. The fences had been repaired, the animals were healthy, and the barn stood strong against future storms. Life settled into a rhythm, but it was no longer the quiet, solitary routine that Eli had once known. Now every morning brought laughter, conversation, and shared work. Every evening brought warmth, companionship, and a quiet joy that had long been absent from the ranch. Eli had noticed the changes not only in the ranch itself, but also in himself. He felt lighter, more open, and happier than he had in years. Martha's presence had reshaped his life in ways he could never have imagined. Her strength, humor, and energy had brought a vibrancy to the ranch, and her kindness had softened the edges of his solitary heart. He realized that he had fallen in love with her, not a love built on imagination or expectation, but one forged in shared work, laughter, and trust. Martha, too, had adapted to life on the ranch. She moved through the days with confidence, managing chores, caring for the animals, and tending the small garden they had expanded together. She laughed at the occasional mistakes, helped Eli when he struggled, and shared in his quiet victories. Though she was larger and stronger than he had expected, Eli found that her presence was a source of strength and comfort, not intimidation. They had grown into a partnership that balanced his methodical nature with her bold energy, their differences complementing each other in every task. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Eli and Martha walked together through the fields, checking the fences, one last time before evening. The cattle grazed peacefully, and the breeze carried the scent of grass and earth. Eli glanced at Martha, noticing the way her hair caught the light, the determined set of her shoulders, and the warm smile that seemed to greet every challenge with confidence. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence, for the unexpected way she had entered his life, and for the bond that had grown between them. "Martha," he said softly, pausing to watch her adjust a fence post, "I've been thinking. I can't imagine this place without you now. You've changed everything for the better. I don't know what I did to deserve you." Martha turned to him, her expression gentle but steady. "Eli," she said, resting a hand on his arm, "I came here not knowing what to expect. I knew life would be hard, that ranch work wasn't easy. But I didn't come for perfection. I came because I wanted to share a life with someone honest and hard-working, someone who could be a partner. That's you." Eli felt warmth spread through him. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight he had not expected. He realized that happiness was not about imagining the perfect companion. It was about accepting and cherishing the real person who stood beside you. And in Martha, he had found that person. That evening they prepared a meal together, the kitchen filled with the aroma of stew, fresh bread, and laughter. They spoke of plans for the coming months, planting crops, improving the barn, and even adding a few animals to the herd. Each plan was made together, every decision shared, reflecting the partnership that had grown between them. Eli noticed how naturally she fit into the life he had once imagined would be only his, and he felt a deep sense of contentment. As the stars appeared in the night sky, they sat together on the porch, the quiet of the land surrounding them. The air was cool, filled with the gentle sounds of animals settling in for the night and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Eli felt a sense of peace he had never known. For years he had lived in solitude, thinking that he was content with his work and his routines. Now, with Martha by his side, he realized that life could be richer, fuller, and more rewarding than he had ever imagined. "Martha," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "do you think maybe we could make this place a home together? Not just for work or survival, but for life?" She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Eli, I've been hoping you'd ask. I've already made it home. And I want to stay for all the storms, for all the quiet days, for every sunrise and sunset with you." The words filled Eli with joy. He felt the weight of years of solitude lift from his shoulders, replaced by a steady warmth that spread through his heart. He realized that love did not have to be imagined, delicate, or perfect. Love could be strong, practical, patient, and enduring, and Martha embodied all of those qualities. The days that followed were filled with shared moments both large and small. They tended the fields together, repaired fences, and cared for the animals, but they also shared quiet mornings over coffee, playful teasing over minor mistakes, and long talks beneath the stars. Their bond deepened with each passing day, strengthened by shared work, laughter, and trust. Eli found himself looking forward to every morning, not just for the work, but for the chance to see Martha smile, hear her laugh, and share in her presence. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Where once whispers of doubt or curiosity might have filled the air, now there was respect and admiration. They saw Eli and Martha working together, laughing together, and managing the ranch as a united team. The townspeople who had initially questioned the mail-order arrangement now saw a partnership that was genuine, strong, and inspiring. Eli felt a quiet pride in their respect, not because it validated his choice, but because it reflected the life he and Martha had built together through hard work and trust. One afternoon, a small mishap occurred. A young colt wandered into the orchard, spooked by a passing hawk. Eli and Martha moved quickly, guiding the frightened animal back to the pasture. They worked together with gentle words and steady hands, and once the colt was safe, they both laughed at their shared panic. "I suppose some things never change," Martha said, smiling. "Even after all these weeks, we still have surprises." Eli laughed, feeling the joy of the moment. "Yes," he said, "but with you, every surprise feels manageable, even fun." The realization settled over him. Martha had become an essential part of his life, someone who made the hard work lighter, the challenges easier, and the quiet moments infinitely more meaningful. He had imagined a delicate companion in letters and daydreams, but he had received something much more valuable, a real partner, capable, strong, loving, and full of life. As the seasons changed, Eli and Martha continued to grow together. They expanded the garden, added a few more animals to the herd, and improved the barn. But more importantly, they shared in the quiet moments that made life worth living. Morning coffee on the porch, long walks across the fields, laughter at minor mistakes, and evenings under the stars. All these moments built a life richer than either had imagined. One crisp morning, Eli found himself watching Martha as she tended the garden. The sunlight caught her hair, the breeze rustled the leaves around her, and she hummed a soft tune as she worked. He felt a sense of gratitude and love that he had never known. The woman he had imagined in letters was not here. What was here was far better. Martha was real, strong, capable, and kind, and she had brought a warmth to his life that no imagination could ever have matched. "Martha," he said, approaching her slowly, "I think I can finally say that I'm happy. Really happy. Not because life is easy, but because we face it together." She turned to him, her eyes bright and steady. "Ellie, I feel the same way. Life has been challenging, yes, but with you, it's full of laughter, trust, and love, and I wouldn't trade a single day of it." They stood together, the wind carrying the scent of the fields and the warmth of the sun on their shoulders. In that moment, Eli understood that happiness was not about perfection or expectations. It was about companionship, partnership, and the courage to face life together. He took Martha's hand, feeling the strength and warmth in hers, and knew that they would face whatever challenges came next, side by side. The story of Eli and Martha closed not with grand events or dramatic turns, but with quiet satisfaction. They had built a life together, forged through hard work, trust, and shared experiences. The ranch was secure, the animals were cared for, and the home was filled with laughter and warmth. But more importantly, Eli had found a companion who completed him in ways he had never expected, someone who turned solitude into partnership, challenges into triumphs, and ordinary days into moments of joy. As the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow across the fields, Eli and Martha stood on the porch together. The sky was a painting of pink, orange, and gold, and the land stretched peacefully around them. They did not speak much, for words were unnecessary. Their hands were clasped, their hearts aligned, and the quiet of the evening wrapped around them like a gentle blanket. Life on the ranch would continue to bring hard work, unpredictable weather, and occasional challenges, but Eli no longer feared the unexpected. With Martha by his side, he knew they could face anything: storms, labor, or loneliness. Together they had discovered that love was not about imagining the perfect companion, but about accepting, cherishing, and growing with the real person before you. And in Martha, Eli had found exactly that. The stars began to appear one by one, and the night settled over Red Rock with a calm that Eli had never known in his solitary years. He looked at Martha, feeling a profound sense of gratitude, love, and hope for the future. Life had taken an unexpected turn, bringing him not the delicate companion he had envisioned, but a woman far stronger, braver, and more remarkable than he could have imagined. And in that realization, he felt a deep, enduring joy that would carry him through every sunrise and sunset to come.